how's it going? This is Justin with Lesser Dog Tutorials, and this is episode 5, I think, in the Elden Ring Soulslike tutorial series for Unreal Engine 5. And in this video, we're going to be focusing on the blocking ability. Last one we did was jumping. So now we're going to start incorporating additional abilities, which may or may not affect the abilities that we previously added in, or future abilities that we will add. The block ability does actually affect the jump ability and vice versa, because when the player is jumping, we don't want them to be blocking, and when the player is blocking and they jump, we want to interrupt the block so that the jump can be performed. So before we get into everything here, I want to do a little bit of cleanup, and this is probably going to be a reoccurring thing because this project will be probably pretty large, and I'm kind of learning as I go and letting you know what I've discovered and how I'm implementing things. So if you see that I maybe am missing something or something could be improved, you think, let me know in the comments and we can work together to make this project really cool. For instance, in this video, there is something that can be improved from the last one, and thanks to a viewer named Random Guy, there is a function that we should be using that actually takes the place of the anim notifies that we made earlier. So if you open up the third person character, you'll see that we have this jump section that we made last time, and we have this onLanded function. This onLanded function is called from, if we go to characters, mannequins, animations, Manny, the land animation, we call the anim notify onLanded, which is, again, another file. So in Blueprints abilities, there is a anim notify called onLanded, and this calls the onLanded function in the third person character, and it performs everything. This works perfectly fine. However, there is an event onLanded function. So if we were to just search for onLanded, we'd find our function onLanded, but also event onLanded. And this actually fires when the player lands on the ground. So that actually will work the exact same as this that we made last time, but we actually don't need the anim notify. So we can delete this. And it's good that we did the anim notify because we will probably be using this again where a function doesn't already exist later. So it's good to know that that existed. So let's clean up this onLanded anim notify. So I'm just going to delete it from the animation and save that. And then I'm going to delete it here from the game. So with that deleted, we can just save everything and test it out again. And then you'll see we're grounded, jump in the air, airborne, and grounded. Everything's working the exact same as before. We just have less stuff confusing things now. So that's good. And speaking of less stuff confusing things, we can also make some changes here, which I figured out recently. We don't need to do this remove active effects with granted tags function here, because we can actually remove the effects from the effects we apply. So for instance, when we've landed and we're doing GE is grounded, so the gameplay effect is grounded, we can open up the is grounded gameplay effect, and you'll see here at the bottom we have a section called remove gameplay effects with tags. So we could really just do the exact same thing when we apply this gameplay effect. So for instance, remove gameplay effects with tags in the added section, we could say we want to remove is airborne. And then for the is airborne, we can do the inverse of that and remove is grounded. So if we went back and we just removed this completely, and then that would reset it, and then we just bring this in, this should work the exact same way. So let's see if that fires what it needs to. Also, down here in the console command, I was using show debug ability system. And if you type that once and you want to go back to it, all you have to do is just select in here and hit up, and you'll go to things you previously typed in. All right, and so testing it out, it starts off with is grounded, jump is airborne, and it removes is grounded, and vice versa. So now we've cleaned it up even more. Things are a little bit more efficient, and that's great. So now with that cleaned up, let's continue on and get that blocking ability working. So with adding any new ability, we just need to add a gameplay ability. So search for gameplay ability. And we'll just add the standard gameplay ability in, and we'll name it GA_block. So we can open up the block ability. And the first thing we want to do is add this ability tag. So I would say it's another action. So we'll add another player.action.block. So now firing the block action will fire the ability. So while we're at it, we can head back over to the third person character. And since the block ability is created, we can, before we forget, go to the class defaults and add the block into the default abilities. Sweet. So now we can head over to where the block section is, and we'll delete the is grounded check and the print strings. And then we will try to activate abilities by tag. And remember, for block, we want ongoing and triggered, because this is going to be an ability that will always be active when you're holding the block button down. So now we just need to create a gameplay tag container specifically for this. So we'll promote that to a variable and call that block tag container. After compiling, we can then set the default value to be player.action.block. So now that we have the block input firing the block ability, let's create a blocking gameplay effect that is applied to the player when they block. That way we can use this later to say specifically what stats change so that damage is reduced. So we'll just say GE_is blocking. And then if we just open that up, we'll just do a couple things in here. For instance, the duration policy will be infinite, not instant. And then for granted tags, we can create a new tag that this grants, which would be a player dot is blocking. So the gameplay effect for now just provides this tag, player.isBlocking. Otherwise, we're going to decide what that does at a later time. And for the gameplay ability for block, it's also going to be relatively simple. The first thing we want to do is commit the ability. Then it's going to apply gameplay effect to owner. And that gameplay effect is blocking. And then it's going to end the ability, which is right here. And you can just remove this on end ability because we don't need that. So it is a very simple ability. We're just setting up the application of the gameplay effect for is blocking. Back over in the third person character blueprint, we just need to decide what happens when the block is completed. So the best thing to use for this would be the node called remove active effect with granted tags. And we already have the ability system component here, so we could just put that right into the target and delete this extra one. And we'll do the is blocking again. So I'm holding the right mouse button and it says player.isBlocking and it's counting up like crazy. If I release, it does remove it. However, we want it to not continue to count up like that. So we don't want to keep stacking it. We want it to only be applied once. So let's figure that out. So what we need to do is determine when this ability can be fired so that it only fires once. That would probably be best done in the activation blocked tags, meaning if we are blocking, if the player is blocking, then this will not fire. So it will apply once, The gameplay effect for is blocking will be applied, which applies the is blocking tag. And then anytime it's trying to activate again, it won't because the is blocking is already applied. And so you see, if I right click and I hold it down, it continues to say is blocking the entire time, which is good. It's only a stack of 1. And I release it, it goes away, I bring it back in, stack of 1, nothing else changes. Great. So that's working well. Let's see if we can incorporate the jump to affect the blocking ability. So that also should be pretty simple. All we need to do is say that in the gameplay effect is airborne, we want it to remove a gameplay effect with tags, not just the is grounded, but we also want to add is blocking. Additionally, in the block gameplay ability, in the activation block tags, we also want to add is airborne so that we cannot block while the character is in the air. All right, so I'm blocking and I'm grounded. If I jump, I'm airborne and nothing else. And then when I land again, I'm back to blocking. And so if I jumped and hit block in the middle of it, when I land, I'm blocking. And if I just run off an edge, it goes to airborne and is blocking goes away. So we have the functionality of the effect working. So the next thing that we want to do is visually show that our character is blocking when in fact they are blocking. So next we want to open the animation blueprint for the Rune player because we're going to update this just to get the blocking working. So we're going to want to disconnect that output pose because this section here really is just going to be what the right arm is doing. So I'm just going to comment that with right arm, and then from the layered blend per bone, I'm going to do a new save cached pose. Then I'm going to call this right arm. Now what I'm thinking is that we will make this a lot more complicated. It'll essentially be trying to decide what the right arm is doing based on whatever weapon is equipped. So if it's a great sword, it'll use this animation. And if it's, a smaller sword, it'll be held at the side and things like that. So now that we just have the right arm ready to go, we now need to create a animation setup so that the shield is blocking and using whatever the right arm is doing. So why don't we just do a layered blend per bone? So it's the same as this, except for instead of the right clavicle, which is what we have up here, I'm just going to copy that. We're going to use the left clavicle. So I'll paste that and then delete the R and add an L. And then we're using the right arm pose. And the pose we're switching to, or we're blending, is the block shield animation. Oops, that's dive roll. Right here, block shield. So now it takes whatever the right arm's doing, and then it blends the block shield in, and then we do another new saved, or new save cached pose, and we'll say this is block, or blocking. I'll comment this, and I'll just say blocking. And now we just need to decide if we're using the blocking pose or just the right arm pose. And that would best be done with a blend poses by bool. So the two that we're using is right arm and blocking, so I'll just get right arm, which is the false. So we're going to say that the bool here is blocking. I'll bring that in. So if we're not blocking and it's false, then we're using right arm. If we are blocking, it's true, then we're just using the blocking pose. Right after this blend poses by bool, I'm just going to throw in this default slot, which if you throw in an animation montage or something, it will play here, meaning it will override basically everything right before the output pose. So this should be all we need to do in here. Relatively simple. This is something that will be a lot more complex later, but for now, we just want to get this stuff working. So with that done, the only thing we need to do is change is blocking based on if the character is blocking. So I think what I'm going to do, since blocking is a ability that probably enemies will use too, I don't want to make it just for the player. So what I'm going to do is create a new class that will go between this rune retriever character and our third person character. If you open the third person character, you'll see its parent class is the rune retriever character. So let's just make a new rune retriever character right here. And I'm going to call this BP rune care. And then I'm going to base all humanoids, or at least maybe additional creatures, off of this. And then if I go into the third person character, I go to class settings, I can change the parent class to be this new rune care blueprint. And then nothing really is affected because all it is doing is just being a middleman, and anything I put in here will go to the third person character. So what I want to put in here is just a function that says blocking and finished blocking. So now I have two functions, blocking and finished blocking. If I compile and save in the third person character, I can override these. You can just see it over here. We have blocking and finished blocking. And all we're doing in the blocking section is we're going to get the anim instance. And it's coming from the mesh. And we'll just cast to the we'll cast to ABP rune player. And we'll set is blocking to true. And then we'll copy this stuff. And if you wanted, you could just do this once on begin play, which I think I'll do. So go back to the event graph up here in event begin play before attach equipment. Just going to add this in. And then I'm going to promote that to a variable called anim BP. And then in blocking, I will just use this anim BP to set is blocking to true. And then finish blocking, I'll set it to false. Cool, so now we just need to run these functions. So in the abilities, so it would be rune retriever, blueprints, abilities, block. So we essentially just need to be notified when is blocking is applied, which is easy because it would be right here. But we additionally need to know when is blocking is removed. And there is a function we could use if we were to disconnect this end ability. And if we search for wait, you can see all of these tasks here where we can wait for updates and things. So the one we're looking for is gameplay tag remove. And what this will do is it will just wait until a specific tag is removed, and when it's removed, it will fire this. So if we fire the end ability when the is blocking tag is removed, then we can override the on end ability. And then right here, we could say, hey, is blocking is done. So we would run the finished blocking function. So let's just do that real quick. For the wait gameplay tag remove, there is an async task and a little output pin right here. If we promote this to a variable, this will set this async task as a variable. Then we'll just call it wait for tag removal. And the reason that we are making this a variable is that we want to be able to end this task if the ability is over. And we could just leave it without doing this, but it's always good to be sure. So when the ability is ended, we're just going to get this, then we're going to check if it's valid, and if it is, we're just going to end the task. This is just a safety net, just in case for some reason these tasks keep piling on top of each other, and we definitely don't want that. So now let's just move this stuff down and this stuff here over, and we're going to add the function calls to get the blocking working. So search for get actor info, and then the return value we want to break. And then the owner actor we cast to rune character, or BP rune care, the one we just made that is the middleman. And this is because, remember, this blocking ability will be used on multiple different enemies too. So when it has, the cast has succeeded, we want to run blocking. And then we run this wait task, waiting for the player.is blocking. But in reality, we're not waiting for player.is blocking. We'd be waiting for character is blocking. So I guess let's go ahead and make that. We'll create a new tag and we'll say character.is blocking. So now we're looking for a tag called character is blocking to be removed, and it's more general. And once it's removed, it will run this where we're doing the same thing. We're going to cast and we're going to say finished blocking. And it probably would be best to put this right at the beginning. And then after we run this, we can close out the task if it's still operating. So with all of these things done, we probably want to update the character.is blocking. The first one can be found right here in the block ability. So in the activation block tags, we can remove the player is blocking and just add the character is blocking. The next one can be found in the is blocking gameplay effect down here in the added tags. We'll just switch that. And then the next one is in the airborne effect down in the remove gameplay effects with tags. We'll swap that one out. And I think the last one is in the third person character right here when we complete the block input. We'll swap that out too. And then if you go to project settings and search for tags, we can remove the player is blocking tag. All right, let's test this out. So I'm holding right mouse button and he's holding the shield up. I release it, shield goes away. I'm blocking, I jump, shield goes back. And only when he lands or she lands does the blocking actually start. So that is exactly what we're looking for. I would say the shield, holding the shield's a little weird, so maybe we can fix that. But that will be in the future videos. So that's going to be it for this video. We got blocking working. Up next is probably going to be rolling or attacking. I'm not really sure yet, but please stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more to come. If you like the video, please hit like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.